Well, away from the markets and back here in Africa, and beginning from today, consumers in South Africa will have to spend more on petrol and diesel as the government begins to implement an increase of these commodities by 74 cents a litre. That's from today. The Department of Energy on Monday announced fuel hikes of 74 cents a litre for both grades of petrol. Okay, joining me now to look at this is some data and economic analyst from Johannesburg, TRINITY NCUBE. Good afternoon, TRINITY. Thank you very much for joining us on the show.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me once again.
So how did it feel today, waking up to see that the price of petrol and diesel have changed at the pumps?
Yeah, well, quite disappointing. However, we have come to expect these kind of movements. If you track back to last year, this sort of movement happened again. I mean, I think it was, we had the value-added tax that was increased right about this time for the 1st of April 2018, followed by a series of 5 fuel increases. So I'm expecting something of a similar pattern this time around, as well as, so the fuel increase was expected. But you also have the fuel levy, which was announced in the budget speech by the finance minister. We're expecting 20 cents of that to come in effect on the 1st of April and 9 cents to come in on the 1st of June. So it's going to be quite a lot of pressure on consumers.
Well, talking about the budget, which was presented by the finance minister, then he talked about the bailout for Eskom and South African Airways. Now, having listened to him, do you think that perhaps this move for these increases would be for them to be able to raise funds for these ailing government firms?
Yeah, it could be one of the possibilities, because right now you need a lot of fiscal consolidation. There's also a lot of pressure just for government to be able to raise funds from most of the tax avenues. Bases are actually squeezed. So as you could see, there wasn't any increase in corporate tax and personal income tax. So the only way he could maneuver was to look at your sin taxes, your alcohol, your cigarettes. There's also a likelihood of sugar tax coming up, as well as several carbon taxes. These are ways in which government can actually raise funds. If you do the calculations, you find, I think particularly for the fuel levy, if you look at how much each person or each liter is going to be taxed, you'll be looking at about 150 billion rand being able to be raised. The only issue that I have is, of course, when when all these revenues come into the port, how they're distributed could be an issue. Coming again to the issue of the bailout that you just mentioned now, you're looking at your Eskom, you're looking at your South African Airways, you're looking at your Transnet and whatnot. It's quite a challenge to bail out these companies, but they're too big to fail. So as the finance minister put it. So, but at this point, I mean, there's a lot of discipline that is needed within those government services. These are some of the sectors in which actually they brought down the GDP figures, as you see the decrease from last quarter to now.
Yeah, well, talking about the GDP, I was to ask you, how did you read that number? We saw 1.4% in the 4th quarter of 2018 and, of course, 0.8% for the year.
Yeah, I wasn't really surprised. If you remember, we did discuss this issue around the GDP figures, if they were going to be sustainable. The 2.6, I knew it was way too high. I mean, if you look at 1994 to now, the average has been around 2.77%, and 2.6%. I knew it was very, very, it was very high, and I knew with the fiscal or macroeconomic fundamentals on the ground, the institutional framework and whatnot, I knew that was going to sustain. So we're going to see this volatile, up and down, up and down. Fortunately, I don't think we'll go into a technical recession, so that's a bit of optimism on that side, but. The sectors that are not doing well, like your mining and so forth, and then you're looking at your manufacturing, where there's a boom. But again, now you're having a weaker rand, very volatile rand, and then you're also looking at some of the issues around, Brent crude oil, which is beyond our control. So those are some of the issues we don't have much control of. So what can happen then is obviously trying to strengthen the institutional framework and the policy certainty. This is an issue that has been there for decades.
Well, after the release of the GDP yesterday, today we saw the government coming up with a projection, projecting the GDP growth rate at 1.7% at the end of 2019. Is that optimistic?
Well, it's quite generous, but look, you know, it's election season, so you know you have to push a little bit of optimism to the electorate and the citizenry. So, but at the end of the day, there are certain things that are not there that I don't see as an economist. There are certain numbers that just tell you a different story. If you look at it objectively, there's a lot of work to be done to even maintain the 1.4 that we have right now, because the real economic growth, I mean, as of 2018, was actually 0.8. So whoever is pushing to say 1.7, that means doubling. You know, it's just unrealistic, I mean, to be honest.
And so what would all of these mean for Ramaphosa's re-election next month, looking at the increase in petrol prices and diesel prices, and of course, perhaps the slow growth in GDP and all the ESCOM and South African Airways issues?
Yeah, it's quite a challenging. I mean, I feel for him, I have to say. I mean, coming in, you know, with a lot of chaos that's within the South African economy right now, it's very difficult for him to maneuver. You got to give it to him though, because you know he's talking reforms, which is very important. I attended a Black Business Council Summit at the end of last week. There's a lot of optimism. You know, you want to have a lot of people involved in the economy. You know, you have a lot of unemployed youth. You have a lot of Black businesses that want trying to come into the market and meaningfully, you know, engage with the marketplace, going into the global market. He's got the right policy frameworks. You know, again, the challenge is implementation. Will he be able to execute all of these promises? He's constrained from a political perspective because now there are two factions, you know, within the ANC right now. So until he gets the strong mandate, you know, he needs to perform very well in the elections for him to be able to articulate his agenda, which I'm hopeful he will be able to. But at this point, he can't even act tough on corruption because he needs the vote. Unfortunately, some of the people who have to lobby for him are actually some of the corrupt, you know, members. I mean, this is the African story every single time.
Well, let's just wish him luck in his drive to up the ante for the economy. Thank you very much for your time, Trinity NCUBE.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll take a peep into the Nigerian equities market for today's update. Just stay with us.